Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Mr.Night-Terror. If you enjoy creepypasta narrations, hit like and subscribe. I'll be posting a new video every week. So sit back and relax and enjoy this narration. Try not to get too scared. I've always been the loner type, the guy who just gets lost in the crowd. I grew up and I lived in Lexington, Kentucky. I worked as a software engineer. My name is Daniel Coleman. Codes were my world, and with each passing day, I just dug myself deeper into this virtual maze. As much as I loved my job, the isolating routine it induced was suffocating me. I worked from home mainly, rarely ever getting a chance to interact with my colleagues or anyone else for that matter. The computer screen was both my companion and my prison, reflecting a version of myself that was becoming increasingly detached from the rest of the world. All my meetings were done virtually, all my coffee breaks were just solitary affairs, and my conversations were just mainly through emails and chat boxes. And I think that's why I found comfort in nature. The trails, the mountains, the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves all gave me a sense of being. Each time I found myself gasping for air in the urban chaos, I would just retreat into the arms of Mother Nature. My hiking experiences, they became my escape. Weekend trips to Red River Gorge or the Cumberland Gap, they became my ritual. The joy of conquering a tough trail, the peace of sunrise viewed from a mountaintop, and the thrill of seeing wildlife in its natural habitat was a world far removed from the constant hum of computer servers. I felt a connection to the world around me that was painfully absent in my life. Each trip brought its revelations. The sight of the Milky Way splashed across the night sky, the scent of dew-laden ferns at dawn, and the pure exhilaration of survival in the wild was surreal, to say the least. The more I experienced, the more I yearned for these encounters. The monotony of my life in Lexington began to wear me down to the point to where I started fantasizing about a long-term escape from my life. It was on one such monotonous day in the sweltering heat of July 2011 that the idea took root. It was a bold plan, a challenge that would test my mental and physical limits, a quest that would truly allow me to break free from my urban cage. A thru hike on the Appalachian Trail. It was a daunting 2,200-mile trek through a world untouched by technology, unmarred by human pettiness. It would be just me in the vast wilderness, and a trail winding through 14 states. I was a man looking for an escape, ready to change the pixels on my screen for the stars in the sky. I found my mind wandering more and more towards the Appalachians. This mountainous trail that stretched from Georgia to Maine had me intrigued for years with its alluring promise of unadulterated wilderness, centuries of history, and unparalleled biodiversity. It was a world far removed from the pixelated existence that I lived, a world that pulled me towards itself with a force I could no longer resist. The decision was made. In the early spring of 2012, I was going to embark on this 2,200-mile trek across the spine of the eastern U.S. The mere thought of the journey filled me with a strange mixture of exhilaration and fear, a cocktail of emotions I've never tasted before. The months turned into a blur as I prepared for the mammoth journey. My small apartment started to resemble a mini outdoor supply store as I meticulously accumulated my gear, each piece carefully researched and chosen for its durability, practicality, and weight. I had an ultralight backpack, a one-person tent, and a down sleeping bag for those cold, chilly nights in the mountains, a portable stove, and a water purifier. The list seemed endless. My living room floor became a sea of maps and guidebooks. Each contour line and trail marking was scrutinized and memorized. Physical preparation was just as essential as the gear. My body had to be trained to withstand the rigors of the trail. Long hours were spent jogging in the neighborhood park and on my strenuous workouts that pushed my body to its limits. There were times when my muscles screamed in protest, but the vision of the trail kept me going. I focused on my endurance, my agility, and my strength, pushed myself harder with each passing day. Emotionally, I was preparing myself for the solitude that the trail promised. The prospect of spending weeks alone in the wilderness filled me with a sense of foreboding that was both frightening and exciting. I envisioned myself walking through dense forests, crossing babbling brooks, scaling rocky outcrops, and sleeping under a canopy of stars, all in splendid isolation. I pored over countless blogs and guidebooks, reading tales of encounters with black bears and venomous snakes, stories of the challenge of finding potable water, or the joy of a warm meal after a grueling 20-mile day. I started imagining myself in those situations, mentally preparing for the numerous obstacles and challenges the trail would throw my way. The months of preparation passed in a frenzy of anticipation and anxiety, each day bringing me closer to the unknown wilderness that awaited me. As the day of departure approached, my dreams were filled with a peculiar blend of fear and thrill. It was a potent mix that reflected the sheer unpredictability of what lay ahead. The day I had been waiting for had finally arrived. The early morning mist was gently rolling off the mountains as I took my first steps onto the trail. The path stretched out before me, a winding serpentine disappearing into the dense green wilderness. It was as if the wilderness was inviting me into its enigmatic embrace, the silence punctuated only by the rustling of leaves beneath my feet and the melodic chirping of birds high above. The first few days were surreal. I meandered through the dense forests of the Smoky Mountains, surrounded by towering oaks and pines, their majestic boughs forming a leafy canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, mystical glow. The air was a cocktail of rich earth, pine needles and blooming wildflowers, a scent so natural, so raw that every breath felt like a cleansing of the city soot from my lungs. I stumbled upon blooming rhododendrons. Their vibrant pink flowers were a stark contrast against the monotone greenery. And delicate trilliums, their three-petal flowers bowing gracefully to the wind. I watched deer graze in the twilight, their wary eyes fixed on me. And once I caught a glimpse of a black bear in the distance, its glossy fur a dark smear against the green canvas. The physical exertion was punishing. My muscles screamed in protest as I navigated treacherous accents and descents. I'd fall into my one-person tent at the end of each day, my body spent but my mind teeming with the day's experiences. The simple act of preparing a meal on my portable stove, the satisfaction of savoring the modest, warm food, while listening to the nocturnal noises of the forest, brought a profound sense of contentment. I relished the solitude. It was just me, my thoughts, and the undisturbed wilderness. I found solace in my own company. My loneliness faded into a comfortable silence. Conversations were replaced with self-reflection. I felt myself peeling away from the digital world, slowly but surely. The non-stop pinging of social media and the relentless pressure of my life felt like a distant memory. By day, I was a humble traveler, crossing the infinite expanse of nature's grandeur. By night, I was just a tiny speck under the vast star-studded sky. I was insignificant in the grand scheme of things, yet I felt connected. I was rooted in the world in such a way I've never been before. When I first saw him, I was nearing the 100-mile marker on a chilly April morning. Sitting on a moss-covered log by the trail, he appeared as a mirage at first, his silhouette blurred by the morning haze. As I approached, the image solidified into a man unlike any I'd ever met. His name was Elijah Brown, a man as aged as his name. He was a gnarled embodiment of time, with deep-set wrinkles that narrated a saga of years spent under the sun and against the wind. His hair and beard were a wild explosion of white, and his eyes held the color of a foggy dawn. There was an unsettling aura about him, an aura that clung to him like the moss on the trees. "Elijah," he introduced himself, extending out a hand that was weather-beaten and scarred. His voice was grovelly, resonating with the wisdom of ages. As our hands met, a jolt of peculiar energy passed. A cold whispering wind that hinted at the obscure reality lurking beneath his cordiality. With his cryptic smile and eyes that held a story, Elijah began to share tales about a place called Eden's Hollow. His words painted a picture of an isolated commune, secluded from the modern world, a place that danced to the primal rhythm of nature. I listened. I was entranced as he narrated tales of a community living in harmony with the wilderness, a harmony that bordered the sinister. "There's a charm to Eden's Hollow," Elijah murmured, his eyes narrowing, a strange glow enveloping him, a charm that's alluring to a solitary wander. "But be warned, son, for its charm can be deceiving." His words echoed in the silence of the forest, a cold warning, an omen shrouded in the sweet promise of solitude. My mind buzzed with curiosity. Eden's Hollow, the mysterious commune nestled within the wilderness, was like a challenge presented to my adventurous spirit. As I left Elijah on his mossy perch and resumed my journey, his enigmatic tales danced in my mind, twirling a strange melody. I was both repelled and attracted, my heart pounding with an odd mix of anticipation and fear. Elijah's stories of Eden's Hollow gnawed at the edges of my sanity as I trudged along the familiar path of the Appalachian Trail. Like a moth drawn to a flame, I found myself pulled towards the enigma of the commune. It was a battle within me between the rational mind that insisted on sticking to the predetermined course, or the morbid curiosity that whispered seductively about the allure of the unknown. In the end, it was the allure that won. I chose the path less trodden, setting off towards Eden's Hollow, armed with a little more than a vague direction from Elijah and a burning curiosity. The detour was like a plunge into an alternate world, a realm where the raw power of nature reigned supreme. Each step took me further away from the comfort of the marked trail, deeper into the uncharted wilderness. The journey was punishing, more so than anything the Appalachian Trail had thrown at me. The dense undergrowth clawed at my legs, while the towering trees blocked out the sunlight, casting a perpetual gloom that cloaked the forest floor. Vines and thorns were my constant companions, and the ground beneath me was treacherously uneven. I tripped and stumbled, my body bearing the brunt of this harsh detour. Physically, I was tested to the limits, but mentally, it was a different ballgame altogether. The further I ventured, the more intense the solitude became. The eerie quiet was broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Nightfall brought with it an orchestra of hushed whispers, the forest's nocturnal creatures coming alive, their unseen presence adding a chilling soundtrack to my expedition. Through this journey, I felt a sense of foreboding gradually seeping in, gnawing at the corners of my excitement. As Eden's Hollow neared, a sense of unease sprouted within me, a feeling of dread that was hard to shake off. It was as if the forest itself was trying to warn me of the horrors that lie ahead, yet my curiosity now morphed into a monstrous entity. I pressed on, my heart echoing with Elijah's tales, my mind envisioning a quaint commune untouched by civilization. After 2 grueling days of navigating through the harsh wilderness, I finally stumbled upon Eden's Hollow. Lying nestled in the shadowy recesses of a valley ominously named the Devil's Punch Bowl. The first sight of the commune was a stark contrast to the wilderness that surrounded it. A strange sense of serenity pervaded the air, creating a deceptive tranquility that veiled the underlying sinister nature of the place. As I looked around, a dozen or so makeshift cabins dotting the landscape were the first things that caught my eye. Crafted from fallen trees and cloaked in moss, they seemed to blend seamlessly with their surroundings, almost as if they were a natural extension of the forest itself. But what really caught my attention were the symbols carved onto the cabin's rough surfaces, obscure and cryptic, an unwritten language that held within its strokes an ominous sense of mystery. The inhabitants of Eden's Hollow emerged from their dwellings, their eyes harboring a curious blend of wariness and welcoming warmth. They were an odd mix of people, their faces weathered by time and the elements, their clothes made of animal skins and other fabrics. An unnatural silence hung around them. It was only broken by an occasional murmur or a hushed whisper. As I met each of them, I couldn't help but notice their peculiar aura, an almost animalistic primal quality that set them apart from any other human I'd ever encountered. Their eyes, vivid and intense, bore into mine, making me feel like a lamb under the watchful gaze of a pack of wolves. They seemed to exist in harmony with the land, their lives intricately woven into the ebb and flow of nature. I watched as they gathered food, crafted tools, and performed other daily chores, their movements marked by a graceful efficiency that could only come from years of living in such close quarters with nature. Yet something about them was off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Perhaps it was the way they moved, their gestures slightly too quick or slightly too sharp, or maybe it was the way they spoke, their words carrying an underlying rhythm that was oddly hypnotic. Or perhaps it was the veiled glances they exchanged, hinting at the unspoken secrets hidden behind their hospitable facade. However, my mind, preoccupied with the novelty of this unique experience, brushed aside these eerie impressions. I was an explorer, a traveler, lost in the wonder of a culture so starkly different from mine. I was drawn in, mesmerized by the simplicity of their lifestyle, oblivious to the chilling reality that lurked beneath the surface. Strange dreams and restless slumber marked my first night at Eden's Hollow, the disturbing undercurrent of the place seeping into my subconscious. But the dawn brought with it a sense of normalcy, and I found myself naively shrugging off my unease. My first few days in Eden's Hollow drifted by in a haze of fascination and confusion. The commune's inhabitants welcomed me into their fold with an almost eerie enthusiasm, keen to share their simple yet profoundly alien way of life. I fell into their rhythm, rising with the sun to partake in the chores that marked the commune's existence. I found myself assisting with food foraging. I was skinning hides and repairing the cabins with the same cryptic symbols that marked their exteriors. My hands, once accustomed to the smooth keys of a keyboard, now wielded stone tools with increasing familiarity. As days melded into each other, I observed a peculiar hierarchy in the commune. There was no discernible leader, but subtle shifts in body language and unspoken cues hinted at a form of consensus-based decision-making that was foreign to my urban sensibilities. Amidst them, I found myself a drifter, a stranger navigating the undercurrents of a society built on unspoken rules and cryptic rituals. The dwellings of Eden's Hollow were as intriguing as the people. The cabins, adorned with the same cryptic symbols I had noticed earlier, held an air of raw primal energy. Inside they were surprisingly cozy, filled with handmade furniture and the soft glow of firelight. Yet every night as I lay in my makeshift bed, I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling of being watched, the cabin walls whispering silent tales that unsettled my mind. The commune's daily life was a labyrinth of strange practices. A haunting melody would echo through the valley at sundown, its beautiful and disconcerting rhythm, the language unknown to me. Communal feasts were held under the watchful eyes of towering trees, where the unfamiliar foods were passed around with a reverence that bordered on religion. An unusual detachment marked relationships within the commune. Conversation, while common, was mostly limited to essential communication. There was camaraderie, but it was layered with an undercurrent of caution, a barely perceptible tension that left me on edge. Yet no one else seemed to notice, or perhaps they did, but chose to ignore it, like a secret too dark to acknowledge. All this while my city-bred skepticism simmered beneath the surface. Every fiber of my being screamed at the oddity of it all, yet the allure of the unknown, the raw life lived here, kept me anchored to Eden's Hollow, my curiosity overshadowing my fear. As I immersed myself deeper into the commune's life, I found my days blurring into a series of arcane symbols, haunting melodies, and disquieting interactions. Just as I was about to bid farewell to Eden's Hollow and return to my trail, and leave behind the unnerving oddities of the secluded community, they asked me to stay. An invitation was extended to join them for their upcoming grand feast. The commune buzzed with a renewed energy, a frenzy that made the air hum with anticipation. An unspoken agreement seemed to pass between the inhabitants, their eyes filled with an eager light I hadn't noticed before. My decision to stay was just as impulsive as the detour to Eden's Hollow, a concoction of morbid curiosity and a disconcerting excitement gnawed at me, anchoring me to this land where shadows whispered and silence screamed. The commune transformed into the build-up to the feast. A palpable energy swarmed around the place like bees around a blossoming flower. Men and women busied themselves with tasks, their faces carved with fervor. The humdrum of daily life took on ceremonious rhythm. Every activity was geared towards this grand event. Food was gathered with a fanatical devotion that bordered on ritualism. Berries were plucked with a quiet reverence, and the carcasses of the hunted game were prepared with a care that was both tender and gruesome. The women stirred giant cauldrons, their faces set in grim determination, their humming forming a ghostly chorus that echoed off the enclosing trees. The dwellings, too, underwent a transformation. The cryptic symbols adorning the cabins were retouched with a dark sanguine liquid. The scent of incense hung heavy in the air, and the scent of foreboding snaked around my spine as I saw the same symbols etched into the ground preparing for the feast. The excitement in the commune was contagious, but it was also laced with a disconcerting dread. Whispers of strange rituals to be observed during the feast floated around, each more eerie than the last. There was talk of a dance under the moonlight, an offering to the forest spirits, and a feast that wasn't merely culinary. The merry laughter of the commune's inhabitants rang hollow in my ears. A chill settled my bones as the day of the feast loomed closer. My heart throbbed with a foreboding dread, an unsettling feeling of impending doom. But curiosity, a constant companion since my departure from the Appalachian Trail, urged me to stay, to witness the event that had consumed the commune. The grotesque spectacle of dismembered human bodies strewn across the floor bludgeoned my senses. Their bloodied flesh, crudely butchered and pale under the cold light, was in stark contrast to the impassive man hunched over them, the sharp thwack from his cleaver severing flesh from bone, a cruel metronome in the concert of horrors that unfolded before me. Next to the butcher, a second man roasted and harvested human limbs over an open fire. The hideous sizzle of human fat melting was drowned out by the terrifying realization that crashed over me. The members of Eden's Hollow were cannibals, consuming those who were unfortunate enough to stumble into their isolated world. I fled from the hunt, and a scream lodged in my throat. The night's cold air clung to my skin, a chilling reminder of the gruesome reality I had just discovered. In the chaos of my horror, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Elijah. His face, etched with the ghostly moonlight, was a horrific parody of the man I thought I knew. His predatory eyes glowed in an unholy delight, a smirk playing on his lips as he held out a chalice. "Drink this," he commanded, the dark liquid within it dancing under the lunar glow. The smell of iron, it was pungent and overwhelming, confirmed the ghastly truth. It was blood. The realization that Elijah was a puppeteer behind my nightmare sent ice-cold chills cascading down my spine. He had lured me and guided me into this world of barbaric rituals with the intention of making me one of them. The last shreds of my humanity seemed to evaporate as the chalice pressed into my trembling hands. Tears stung my eyes as I looked up at Elijah. His triumphant smirk was still plastered on his face. Basking in my despair, I was cornered, pushed into a monstrous reality that gnawed at my sanity. The thought of drinking human blood, of fully submitting to their cannibalistic lifestyle, was unbearable. "No," I choked out, my voice barely audible amidst the macabre revelry in the distance. Elijah merely tilted his head, watching me crumble under the weight of the horrifying truth. I was his prey, caught in the intricate web of his twisted game, staring into the eyes of my hunter. The days that followed warped into an unholy blend of time and terror. I found myself dragged into the heart of their savage rituals. Each passing moment, each horrifying act was etching its cruel mark on the canvas of my soul. The sights, the smells, the chilling laughter, they hung over me. A relentless storm of grotesque experiences that refused to relent. One horrifying instance still scorches my mind with its vivid terror. The spectacle of a human body roasted over an open fire greeted us at the commune square. The smell of charred flesh and the crackling of the fire under the open sky created a nauseating orchestra of dread. The commune members circled the feast, their eyes reflecting the fire's greedy glow. As they tore into the roasted body, their enjoyment was unmistakable, a ghastly merriment that seemed to reverberate through the valley. In the midst of this macabre spectacle, a cart was wheeled into the square, its contents sending waves of revulsion through me. The sight of small, lifeless bodies was a sight no human should ever witness. They were children, their innocence extinguished. They lay piled on top of each other, their lifeless eyes reflecting the night's merciless cruelty. Their tender flesh was apparently a cherished delicacy for the commune members. They squabbled over it, a fight fueled by hunger so primal, so abhorrent. It curdled my blood. But each day bled into the next, a string of chilling experiences that pushed me further into the abyss. The brutal reality of the commune was becoming my reality, its horrifying rituals seeping into my existence. I felt my resistance waning, the lines blurring between the man I was and the monster they were molding me into. The constant exposure in their horrifying lifestyle sparked a transformation within me, an insidious metamorphosis that stirred deep within my core. My revulsion began to numb, replaced with a morbid acceptance that was far more terrifying. The cries of horrors that once echoed in my mind started to quiet down, silenced by the survival instincts that demanded I adapt. My panic blossomed into a full-fledged horror as the reality of Eden's Hollow set in. An urgent desire to flee consumed me. I plotted my escape in the dead of night, under the disapproving gaze of the relentless moon, but the wilderness was a treacherous labyrinth. They found me. I was out of breath and terrified, at the end of the dense thicket. Their retribution was swift and merciless. I was hurled into the pit, an unholy abyss in the heart of the commune. It reeked of death. The decaying remnants of the past feast littered the muddy floor. The chilling echoes of my screams only fell on deaf ears, and was met with only the callous silence of the wilderness. For 3 agonizing days I remained in that dank hole. My only companions were the skeletal remains of those who had shared my fate. Hunger gnawed at my insides, thirst scraped my throat raw, and despair nibbled at the fraying edges of my sanity. My pleas for mercy, swallowed by the insatiable maw of the pit, ignored by the eerily harmonious villagers above. Each escape attempt only plunged me deeper into their cruel rituals. My punishments escalated, the horror of the pit, recurring like a vicious nightmare. I was battered, bruised, and broken, both in mind, body, and spirit. My fight wandered, drowned by the disheartening truth. Eden's Hollow was my inescapable reality. Life within the commune warped my perception of normalcy. I caught myself one day sitting amongst the cannibals, my hands smeared with blood, gnawing on a piece of human flesh. The shock of what I had become shuddered through me. The Daniel who had set out on a solitary hike on the Appalachian Trail was lost, replaced by a predator, a creature molded by its horrifying reality of Eden's Hollow. Even as ghastly taste filled my mouth, even as my soul recoiled in horror, I realized a grim truth. The monster within me was awake, and despite my best efforts, it was here to stay. The wilderness was no longer an external entity. It had become a part of me, its primal instincts, consuming my humanity one terrifying bite at a time. As my horror gradually morphed into a morbid curiosity, I descended further into their horrifying customs. Each vile ritual etched itself into my mind. The macabre danced between my lingering humanity and the monstrous appetite that was becoming harder to ignore. An eerie fascination, a horrifying testament to my adaptation in the commune, replaced the dread I once felt. As the days turned into weeks, the impenetrable reality of Eden's Hollow swallowed me whole. The quaint life I once lived in Lexington, consumed by computer screens and quiet evenings, seemed like a hazy dream. Lost in the unforgiving wilderness, the ghost of my old life haunted me, a specter of the past that was no more. The harrowing communion I found myself a part of was beyond anything I could have imagined. When I first set foot on the Appalachian Trail, the taste of human flesh had become familiar. The once horrifying rituals, now a disturbing routine. I was more than just a mere spectator. I had become an active participant, the legacy of cannibalism seeping into my very being. Bitter acceptance gnawed at me. What once was Daniel Coleman, the introverted computer programmer, was now a creature of the wilderness, bound to Eden's Hollow by the blood we shared. The meek hiker in search of solitude had been swallowed whole by the monstrous reality of the commune. As I reflect on my horrifying journey from the solitude seeker to an integral part of the cannibalistic cult, a chilling shiver runs down my spine. What I saw was peace and solitude. What I found was a nightmarish existence I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. My tale stands as a chilling testament to the dangers of the path less traveled. The lure of the unknown, the lure of adventure, can sometimes lead to a grotesque reality which escape is a daunting, nearly impossible task. The hollow pit of my stomach, a constant reminder of my grim existence, is an abyss that continues to torment me. I have traded my humanity for survival, my sanity for existence. The once peaceful whispers of the wind now carry the haunting echoes of the souls we feasted upon. A grim chorus that fills the foreboding wilderness. My journey wasn't just a physical trek across the Appalachian Trail. It was a descent into the abyss from which there is no escape. A grim reality that continues to gnaw at my dwindling sanity. My horrifying tale is a stark reminder of how a journey in search of solitude can turn into a communion with the grotesque, a chilling plunge into the depths of human depravity.